Hello. In today's video I'm going to give you an overview of PlanningSpace Economics, which will cover all of the workspaces. PlanningSpace Economics uses the DFX technology for modeling, so you'll often hear of these two expressions used interchangeably. Let's start with the Manage Inputs tab. This is where you create your hierarchies, your projects, and do most of your work as an economics analyst. The next tab over is Calculate and Analyze, which is where you create result sets for reporting on large groups of projects. Then there's the Regime Library, which is where you create and edit your fiscal models. There is one other area, which is an administration area, which is grouped with the other admin areas of PlanningSpace. So you get to it from that side tab. Here you can manage users, you can manage your currencies and your prices, and view the audit log, amongst other things. When we look at a hierarchy, we can see several documents and folders. At the very top we see a currency deck and a price deck. The currency deck defines the different exchange rates and currencies in use in this particular hierarchy. The price deck defines the prices and the price scenarios to be used. It's normal to arrange a hierarchy based on your corporate structure, and at any point in that hierarchy you can link prices relevant to that particular region or area. By clicking on this little icon, you can add comments, prices, and also ring fence settings for ring fence calculations. As we go down the hierarchy, we see a fiscal regime. This is a global document which defines the fiscal calculations. And once linked into a hierarchy, it will apply to all projects beneath that node. This is a project document, and I can click on it to open. The first thing we see is the Settings tab, where we see the start date and the duration, inflation date, and scalar conversion date. It's also possible to add multiple scenarios in this dialog. At the moment, this project only has a base scenario, but we could easily add others by clicking up here and say upside, for example. And then you could add a downside scenario too, and set up the appropriate scenario weightings. And here I've just defined a Swanson's mean. In addition, you can define working interest. You can have as many groups and partners as you want here. Furthermore, you can also add different categories. So you may find you have a different working interest categories for, say, your exploration capital than you do for other areas of the project. So in this example, we'll assume that there's a 50-50 split between us as company and a partner, but we are paying all of the exploration capital. In addition, you can add reversions, which means that at a particular point in time that relationship may change, and I'll say that this occurs in January 2016, after which point we revert back to a 50-50 share of exploration. The project data contains all the inputs required to do the calculation. In this case, we have production for oil, condensate, NGL, gas 1 and gas 2. We have prices. These prices can come from the hierarchy, and what I mean by that, you can define them at the top level with a price deck, or you could define them locally in the projects. And then we have inputs for capital, op costs, and other. Okay. So if I were to put in some production here, and assume that the price comes from a hierarchy, then I can click Calculate and see my results. This has taken us automatically to this reports sheet, where we can click on the particular reports we want to look at for this project. These are designed in spreadsheets, so they can have any format you like. If you want to look at them a little bit more closely, it's quite easy to drop this panel out of the way and this panel out of the way, and then you can focus on the report itself. Of course, you can choose who you want to report on also. At the moment we are reporting on a net partner. We could switch that and look at a gross report instead. One interesting feature of PlanningSpace Economics is that we can choose whether we want to calculate an EMV, which would then calculate all three scenarios and weight them according to what was configured on the Settings tab, or you can calculate, as we did just now, an individual scenario. So if I click Calculate with EV, it'll go ahead and run three independent scenarios. In addition, of course, we can change the periodicity in the unit system that we're reporting on. At the moment, we're in an imperial unit system. We could switch to a metric, or we could switch to semi-annual, quarterly, or monthly reporting. Finally, you can export these reports to Excel, so you can send them to colleagues or third parties. Let's switch back to the corporate hierarchy and have a look at some of the other documents. So up here we have a reference currency deck. These are customizable and you can enter the exchange rate and inflation rates for the currencies that are relevant to your business. So as not to clutter it with too many hierarchies, you do have the option to specify which currencies you want to view. So here in this dialog we have a massive list of all the available global currencies, and you just put a checkbox next to the ones you want to be shown in this dialog. The other document over here is a price deck, and over here we see that we've entered some price decks for some reference crudes, Brent, WTI, and some other propane, butane, ethane, pentane, etc. We also have some gas prices for UK net balancing point and Henry Hub in the US. You'll also see that up here there's several tabs. I've got a base scenario, a high scenario, and a low scenario, and I can add as many scenarios as I like for each price deck. This is useful because then at any point in the hierarchy I can say, well, for Ethiopia I want to use WTI for my oil, and I want to use LNG Germany import for my gas. And at that point it'll use those prices for all projects beneath that node. Right-clicking on a hierarchy node, you will see that we can also add a term document. This allows us to define fiscal terms unique to a particular area or block. So for example, for the project in Ethiopia, I might want to override the default royalty settings for a particular contract I have in place in this country, where I've negotiated slightly lower royalty rates. When I save that, that will apply to all projects beneath that node unless I override further at a lower level. It's also possible in the fiscal regime to define some presets, which is great when countries have very specific terms for particular regions, for example, offshore, onshore, or perhaps deep water settings. You can even pre-configure your specific contracts where you know them. Now let's switch over and have a look at the Calculate and Analyze workspace. In this workspace, we'll create result sets, which can be done by right-clicking or clicking in the toolbar here. You give the result set a name, and then it opens a document. You choose which bits of the hierarchy you want to calculate. In this case, perhaps all of East Africa. You decide whether you want ring fencing to be on or off. You can choose the partners that were specified to calculate in the individual projects, or you can customize it, in which case you can choose whichever partners you want to calculate in this result set. So let's click Calculate, and a job will be started on the server, and the notification window down here will show you its progress. When it's complete, a little bubble will pop up here to notify the user. Okay. Finally, we'll switch over to the regime library. This area of the application is covered much more extensively in other videos, but I'll give you a quick overview here. They're organized by folder, and you can open any one of these or copy it or create a new one. The regimes have 4 tabs: a template tab where you design the user interface to be shown on the manage inputs area of the application, the designer where you assemble the regime itself, the terms, which is where you set things like royalty rates, bonuses and fees, and other fiscal settings relevant to the regime. You'll note that we can also add presets, which are pre-configured sets of fiscal terms, which makes it very easy for users so that they can pick something relevant such as onshore, offshore, deep water, or in this case for Ghana, we have annual, quarterly, and monthly AOE. Well, that's the end of the introductory video. Feel free to look at some of the other videos available on modeling and other areas of the application, and thanks for your attention.